And so our 3 goals that we have for today, or our outcomes that we want to describe what PBIS is, the what and the why, like why are we doing this? We want to define the features of Tier 1. So Tier 1 is what you guys will be more than likely engaging in on a regular basis. And then some of the essentials of Tier 2 and 3, as you might also participate in some of those activities. So just a little bit of the history of the school, recent school legislation. I believe like in 2012, somewhere around there, a few assembly bills came out, and they wanted schools to use more alternative forms to discipline than suspension. So rather than always suspend or expel students, what are other things that we can use in our toolbox? So schools were mandated to do this. And then also some of the ways students were oftentimes expelled for like having fake weapons and pills, and they wanted to shift that so we weren't expelling as many students, so they could no longer do that. And then also you had to, you can expel a student for a year, but then they had to go back to their school of origin. So those were the 3 big pieces. And then 2 bills that they were trying to pass through, but they were vetoed. But it's just important to know, because it's probably going to come up again, is that we eliminated expulsions for K, which was defiance and disrespect. So we can't just send out students and eventually expel them for defiance, habitual defiance. And then the last item is just that schools that had a high percentage of suspensions and expulsions, and our district was there, they wanted to mandate PBIS. So we didn't do this as a mandate, but we looked at our percentage and we thought we needed to do something to better support our students. So what we found, a big part of the scope of the problem was that our students with disabilities, they were being suspended at a much higher rate than our students without disabilities. So it was like a 13% for those with disabilities and 6% for those without disabilities. And so, and one of the things is we had a question was the suspensions even working? So oftentimes you'll see the same students habitually having problematic behavior. So it wasn't acting as a deterrent, it wasn't changing behavior. So we needed some other practices that we could implement that would change behavior. And oftentimes it might even, they were finding that it might even increase problem behavior. So we kind of break down the relationships we have with kids as we suspend them, and then it's really hard to change those ways. So the data is collected through every student that's suspended or expelled. We have an electronic system that collects all that data. And we look at and part of PBIS, we actually invested in a new system that looks at where is it happening, what time of day, what type of students are being suspended. So PBIS, like we've said, it's not like, it's a framework that we work within to support students. It's not like a program or like a book that you can buy and just okay, go implement this. It's a team of people that actually are deciding and putting things together based on the school demographics, socioeconomic status, all the information that we know about a school, and then we take that and using all the data that we have and putting a system together. It's research-based, so it's been around in California for over 20 years. And we know that it works and it has the outcomes that we want to see. It's always using PBIS, positive behavior intervention systems. It's always using positive language. So instead of saying, don't do this, no, 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 we're saying what we want them to do. So, oh, we want you to be seated, or, it's always phrasing things in a positive light so that we're telling them what we want them to do versus, always having that negative connotation. It's behaviorally based, so we're always putting systems together within our classrooms, in our schools, so that we can change our environment, and then we can maximize learning. It's data driven. We've talked a little bit about that already from the questions. So we're always looking at attendance data. We're looking at our office discipline referrals. We're looking at whatever data, grades that we can get our hands on. We're trying to look at that and make sense of it. and it's also a district initiative. So here's the first video. And this was a Salinas High last school year did a video just to kind of show like the overall to students what is PBIS all about.
Safe, honorable, and sensible.
So what it means to be safe, honorable, and sensible, it doesn't mean you don't have to have fun, because you always get to have fun. What it means is the long view. So do what you need to do today to maintain your reputation, but your good habits for the long view, for your long life. You want to make sure that you reach for the stars, but keep your feet on the ground.
The Cowboy Way means to me being safe, honor, and sensible, but in reality for me it just means about making sure you're protected on this campus. We'll be here to make sure we do that and that you hold yourselves accountable to your education.
Well, obviously, you see that it means to be safe, honorable, and sensible. But most of you already know what those three words mean, so what I'm going to leave you with is a saying from Albert Dumbledore from Harry Potter. And it's that your choices in life are more important than your abilities. So that to me is what this means. Make the right choice every day.
So the Cowboy Way to me is the safe, honorable, and sensible. Is we want you to be safe when you're on campus, when you're off campus with each other. We want you to be honorable, trustworthy, someone your friends can count on, your teachers can count on, and sensible. Just use common sense. What's the right thing to do?
Upstanding cowboy, that's what I want them to exemplify. Safe, honorable, and sensible.
So being a cowboy is about showing our community what we are as a school. So when we go out into the community, we have to do what's right, and that's how we use our safe, honorable, and sensible characteristics.
The way that I'm honorable is I don't litter around the school.
To me, it means to be nice to everybody and not to be rude and just to follow the rules that teachers give you.
Okay, how to be honorable is to be a good friend and not to bully anyone.
The Cowboy Way isn't just about being safe, honorable, and sensible. It's about having a heart of gold.
To be show yourself in a positive manner, dress nice, be positive toward others, and then others will be positive toward you.
So the why of PBIS. So when we do PBIS and we engage in all these things that we'll talk about as we go, the idea is that we're spending less time disciplining students and more time teaching them, and just creating the overall positive climate within the school, better interactions between staff and students, and then also that we're just making it more equitable. So one thing we didn't mention yet is that we also saw our students of color, so our Latinos and our African American students, they were suspended at a much higher rate than their counterpartners. So we wanted to make sure that we have systems that are fair for all students, that we treat everyone in a manner that is respectful, and we look more at the systems we have in place versus how we feel on that day. So PBIS brings that to the table also. So once again, PBIS is a multi-tiered framework. So as students need more intervention, we're able to provide that. And it's a framework that also looks at establishing that really strong positive social culture. So some of the evidence-based, some of the features that we'll talk about are the prevention part, the teaching of the lessons and expectations, our acknowledgement systems, our consistent way that we consequence problem behavior, how we're going to collect data, like we've already talked about a little bit, and then how are we going to support students that might need more individualized support. So these are the two main guys, George Sagai and Rob Horner out of the University of Oregon, who have developed this whole school-wide system. And once again, trying to look at the whole school and making sure that not only our teachers are involved in these systems but our staff, our administrators, and everyone on campus. And a lot of those reasons that PBIS works because it increases like the academic outcomes, decreases behavior problems, makes it fair for all students, and then also it's just an efficient way to deal with these behaviors. So what does the research say about PBIS? So the research that we see, I'll just mention a few of them, is that we see the reduction in problem behavior. We see increased academic performance, so students feel better about themselves, so they tend to perform better. We see a greater attendance rates, the perception of safety, and the list goes on and on. You could read here. So oftentimes when students, and previous to our PBIS systems, sometimes when we would oftentimes react to student behavior. So when students misbehave, it might be easier to remove them, or say, I need, these kids are tough, this certain class, I need to be removed. Or we try to like change maybe the placement, the program. So how can we be more proactive and more positive without trying to just get rid of the student? So that's, and so not being as reactive, being more proactive. So also going back to some of the previous policies, when students would misbehave, the staff would try to get tougher. And a lot of you know about like the zero tolerance policy. So you could never do X, Y, and Z or you'll be expelled. Or we increase the surveillance, so let's just monitor them more. Let's catch them being bad type of stuff. Let's suspend them more, expel students more. Let's give them more training. Let's look at different programs. So these are the previous ways that we approached behavior. But we need to realize that we're in error if we always think kids are doing bad things and we only look at what the bad things that they're doing, because we can teach them what we want them to do through these systems. So through PBIS, or through, like if we're just looking at the bad side of things or suspensions and problem behavior, we try to like control things, or we try to look at what type of triggers and reinforcers, and we actually might have reinforce the behaviors we don't want to see. So we'll talk a little bit about how we, through our reactions, students oftentimes are looking for attention, or maybe they're looking to escape a difficult task. So the way we react, we can trigger them, and we can actually reinforce behaviors that we don't want to see. Another thing that, through PBIS, we want to shift away from the problem being this child to what can we do to change the problem behavior. And then we also want to strengthen the relationships. So students are not born with bad behaviors, and they can learn if we teach them the way we want them to behave. Sometimes we don't communicate these things. So here we're going to talk about the tiered system. So So the first tier, which is the universal interventions, and we're also moving into probably just academic, behavioral, social, emotional, all the continuum of universal. So what do we do for students? And so as far as the universals are, for PBIS, we provide lesson plans. We provide those consistent ways that will to address problem behaviors. And then we also consistently, we're teaching, working with staff on that. And the idea is that most of the students, if we provide these universal systems, 80% of our students should respond to those things, and they won't need any other types of supports. The tier 2 systems, so that's the place in yellow, is for students who might need a little bit more support. So what we call targeted interventions. So at our school sites, the students that might need a little bit more support, we have after school programs, tutorials. We have a program called Check-in, Check-out that we'll talk in more detail. We have mentoring programs. We're going to have like small group social emotional groups that students will be meeting. So students that might need a little bit more support, they'll have those targeted groups, and you guys will be able to refer kids for those types of supports. And then the last piece of the tier is the what we call intensive individualized intervention. So we write a specific plan for the student. So students that might have a severe problems social emotionally, they'll get individualized counseling or therapy. They might get individualized what we call functional behavioral assessments and programs. And they might get what we call wraparound. So what community-based resources can we pull from to support these students? So what PBIS is all about is looking at the data, what information pieces, and then we look at what are we doing, what practices are we putting together for students, and what systems are we needing to change. So it's like this continual circle of looking at for better outcomes through data, practices, and systems. So we're always reevaluating where we're at. And some of the big ideas are that we want to be proactive, and we want to serve all students so that we can have better academic and diminish the problem behavior. So this is a little cartoon. So one of the items says, I started a fire in the lab on purpose. How about you? And the other one says, I tapped my pencil on my desk during study time. So this is funny, but we oftentimes see this in schools where students might be sent out for very differing reasons. And you know, for tapping his pencil, you'll see that. And so we want to have those consistent ways of dealing with those problem behaviors.